We are not able to place conditions on their entry into our markets by saying, if you enter here, you're going to pay taxes. If you enter here, you're going to leave something here. If you enter here, you're going to leave money in the institutions. You're going to contribute to our schools. You're going to contribute to our recreational centers. You're going to contribute to the employment of our people and to the stability of our families. If you cannot contribute to these things, if you cannot create jobs, if you cannot contribute to the education of our people, then we cannot permit you to operate within our borders. This is the way a nation runs. You don't let another people walk in and have their way and walk out and leave you impoverished as a people in the name of a free market. There's no such thing as a free market. Yeah, that's white folks' propaganda. Free and open market. No free market. They force people into their market. Castro was not free to say, I don't want to be a part of it. When he said, I don't want to be a part of it, they did what? Embargoed him and locked him out. The Japanese, in the early part of the century, said, we don't want to be a part of your market. What did the United States do? Sent Admiral Perry in there and blasted those markets open. What free markets do you have there? There are no such things as free markets. And when you learn that, you're going to be the better for it. And we got the markets, but we are not taking advantage of them. We've gotten ourselves in a situation where we are locked out of other people's markets, and we permit them into our own, such that we are locked out of our own market. And then we wonder why we suffer the way we do. It is not because we are poor. If we were that poor and impoverished, then why did those people come to us to earn their living and their wealth? It means then we must be a wealthy people. I was looking over here at a recent report. You see, we have as a people everything that it needs to make a nation. We have telephones, fax machines, computers, highways, bridges, riverways, waterways, trucks, everything that many nations in the world, in fact, the vast majority of nations in the world, wish that they had available to them what the African American nation has available to it. They wish they had the highways. They wish they had the trucks. They wish they had the trains. They wish they had the ships. They wish they had the computers, the telephones, and all of those kinds of things that you can just pick up and dial right away, and they don't have to be routed through France or somewhere else. The lights don't go off at 2 o'clock every day or just flip on and off. You got it all here. Then why then are we not better off than we are? Because it is not enough. As I told you earlier, it is not enough to have gold in your soil, or oil in your soil, or diamonds in your soil. You must have a consciousness. It is only with an appropriate consciousness that these things can be transformed and converted into what? Wealth and power, and can be used for the advancement of a people and the survival of a people. The same is true here then. You cannot just have telephones and faxes and this and that and not just have money in your pocket. That's not enough. You must have a consciousness that transforms those phones and transforms those faxes into a communications network that unites a people across regions and places and cities and becomes a basis for a system of distribution, a basis for uniting and creating a market from which one earns wealth to feed one's family and to stabilize one's social situation. But you can have all of these things, but if you don't have a sense of nation, if you don't have a group consciousness, if you do not identify yourself as a nation, then these are but so many instruments and becomes, as a matter of fact, the means by which we destroy ourselves. We are looking at the black buying power in America here, 1990 to 95. We got a report here called the Georgia Business and Economic Conditions. published here by the Selleck Center at the University of Georgia, titled Black Buying Power by Place of Residence, 1990 to 95. The second of a two-part analysis of buying power in specific markets. What are we talking about here? Is this published for us? No. What it's published for is for white folk. And it's telling them how much money black folk got. And it's telling them that the money black folk got is the difference between their success and their failure. It reads in part here, Georgia's African American population thus controls approximately 16 cents of each dollar in spending power. That is about $1 in 6 is spent by black consumers. How aware are we of the kind of power we have as African people? Clearly, they are a substantial economic force throughout the state. But without a national consciousness, you don't recognize that. But they recognize it. They go on to say, for many of Georgia's businesses, the ability to capture black spending can make the difference between success and failure. They're putting it right in your face. If black spending power, if black spending can make the difference between the success and failure of Georgia businesses, and we're talking about what? White folks' businesses, that means black folk got what? Power. Because power is about what? The ability to succeed or to bring about what? Failure. And when somebody else's success or failure depends on your own behavior, then you have what? Power. New York State, the largest black market in the world, the largest black market in the world and the largest black market in this country. How much money are we worth in New York State, black people? You know how much money we are worth? $61 billion. That is a lot of money. This represents well over 10% of the buying power in New York State alone. I'm speaking of the area, the New York, Connecticut, tri-state area. And what does that mean? Now, but don't look at that absolute figure. Look at what would happen if we reinvested that $60 billion. If we put that $60 billion in black businesses, in black trade, if we invested that $60 billion in gaining equity in the major American corporations, if we use that $60 billion to gain equity in African countries. You know, I was just reading a piece this week about the fact that black investment bankers, a couple of black investment bankers, are selling as much as $100 million of bonds for the African Development Bank. Yes, another black investment banker is selling something like $500 million of securities for African businesses and infrastructural development. What does that mean, African people? That means that if we were knowledgeable of corporate finance, if we were knowledgeable of investment vehicles, we could literally finance the development of Africa. And by buying securities in the African Development Bank, by buying bonds, by buying other investment instruments in African corporations, even if they're owned by white folk, because once we buy the shares, we become the owners. In other words, then, by using black wealth, we can become the vehicle for financing African growth and development. And by using our own wealth and financing our own businesses, developing our own economic system, we would multiply our wealth, and we would not only be then worth 400 billion, we'd be worth 800 billion or more, and we would go stronger. And the stronger we grow, the more others would depend upon how we spend in order to survive, and to that degree, we will gain power over them. If tomorrow we decided as African people, to build co-op supermarkets across this country, and we can do it. So that we can sell our people grocery and food at below wholesale prices. If we decided, using our church organizations as a means for sponsoring these co-op food markets across the country so that we can open them literally simultaneously, and centered then the buying power for all of those co-op centers in a way that then we would have billions of dollars to spend with the suppliers of food. We could then manipulate those producers in terms of the buying power that we have. We can begin then to place our people on their boards. We can begin then to have real and substantial power in America. We have it in our hands, but you got to think of it as nation. It becomes interesting, by the way, if you study this particular breakdown of black spending in Georgia, and I wish we would get these breakdowns across the country. You see, when you become a state and a nation, you develop statistics. You see, and that's where statistics come from. It is the means by which a state and a nation gathers information about itself so that it can use that information to reorganize itself and to set itself up in ways to advance its interests. So once you become a nation, you become sensitive to the fact that you need a lot of information so that you can use this information. Now, when I read about the percentage of black buying power in Georgia by counties, something becomes very surprising. You note, for instance, that black buying power is as high as 25 and 26% in many of these counties. For instance, in Liberty County, Georgia, black buying power there is 22% of the total buying power. In Meriwether, 25%. Peach County, 25%. And you can just go on and on. In some of these counties, black buying power is as much as 45%, 35%. In other words, the black consumer has these counties by the balls. And they are able, if that buying power was to be coordinated and used, to have real impact and to transform the power relations of those societies and of those counties. They would be able, if they are buying half or 25% or 30% of what is being bought in those counties, to establish their own businesses and enterprises there. And they would be able to defend those businesses, enterprises, through the use of the boycott weapon. So what are we saying here then this evening, ladies and gentlemen? That African power is based on an African consciousness, based on an African-centered culture, based on an African-centered personality. And the degree to which our personalities and our culture are based on African values, based on African interests, based on African goals, to that degree we empower ourselves as Africans, and to that degree we escape the power of others over us. Thank you very much for your kindness.
Dr. Amos Wilson. Dr. Amos Wilson.